So you probably think I've touched every square inch so far on this car. But wait, there's more.
Garage time.
This week, I'm gonna work in the engine bay. I've done some welding in here for the coilover gussets and some strengthening plates. So I disturbed the undercoating, that needs to be fixed. I need to prep all the bare metal for epoxy primer. And with any luck, I'll get this all cleaned out and possibly even spray some color on it. Wish me luck, join me here. You can see this in these corner areas here. Right here is where I added these gusset plates to really strengthen this corner. In fact, this is all new metal all the way up to this area right here. So from there down to here is all extra metal. And then these big gussets here are added by me. And then you can see this is where the roll bar terminates. It terminates right on the back of this coilover turret, which is going to be cool. I debated cutting this piece off. I think this is for the engine compartment fuel canister, collects vapors from the fuel system. I think I'm gonna leave it on. I mean, I can cut it off later if it's not used. I would like to run the canister. I think it prevents a lot of odor and fumes in the garage. But if you know what this is, please let me know. I don't have the tank that goes in there, but I suspect it'd be easy to get. So one option is to relocate it to some other more sightly area, but for now, I'm gonna leave this here. If I have to cut it off later, I can easily cut it and touch up the paint. Now it's time just to scrub all these surfaces the best I can. I'm using some of this material. It's in a sprayer. It's Simple Green Max. It's supposed to be an automotive cleaner and degreaser. It's probably just regular Simple Green. And then I have a couple wire brushes here that I picked up. These are nylon, and I hope this will be severe enough, but I also have some brass brushes like these guys too. So I am just going to spray this, let it soak in a little bit, and then give it some mechanical brushing so it gets into all those little crevices of the undercoating, and hopefully this will be the first pass. I'm gonna have to go over this with the wax and grease remover too, but I want to do as much as possible with the biodegradable stuff. Okay, the compressed air and the simple green with the mechanical brushes really did a pretty good job on getting this interior pretty clean. See, up in here, there's a little bit of wire wheeling to do in that corner. And then this side here is a little bit worse. It has a little bit more of the failed seam sealer, so I'm going to be replacing the seam sealer. But in general, you know, it came pretty clean. Okay, these nylon brushes actually work the best, and they don't disturb the undercoating at all or the texture. Really stained areas are tough to get areas. I did use this brass brush, and it worked okay, but it does tend to scratch the undercoating a little bit. This is another soft bristled. This one's a little softer than this one, so this is kind of in between the nylon brush. This is the nylon. This is in between, and then this is the most coarse.
Okay, now I'm going to be using the wax and grease remover. This is the heavy duty stuff that should get all the last residue off, so the primer will stay.
Okay, that should do it for this evening. The towel didn't get that dirty, which means, you know, there wasn't a lot of additional dirt coming off with the wax and grease remover. But now at least I feel like this is a little bit more chemically cleaned. So I'm gonna let this sit overnight. You know, this undercoating is a little bit porous, so that wax and grease remover takes a little while to evaporate out. And also right here, I was unable to get that last rubber donut off. It just needs a little bit of penetrating oil on the other side. So I'm gonna let that sit overnight too, because I couldn't get it off without breaking it. So rather let that sit overnight, don't need it off at this very minute. But that has to come off, and then I'm gonna be scuffing up the metal and just going over this whole area with a red Scotch-Brite pad, and then shoot some epoxy primer. I'm using these wire brushes, but these have been extended. So I just welded with my TIG welder. I welded on this all thread just so I can get into these tight spaces. This one's all worn out, but same thing. This used to be longer, it broke off. This was some thin tubing, but it's welded onto the end of just a standard wire wheel. Just using my drill, and then I'm continuing with the mechanical brushes, some dentist tools, and just some sandpaper. So this is now ready. It's roughed up enough where I can get the epoxy primer in there. I'm gonna brush it on first to get it inside all these nooks and crannies, and then spray the rest. Okay, I got shiny metal now in all this area here where the gussets are, and then this area back here where the undercoating was kind of suspect. All right, I also stripped the paint off of this rear latch panel. You know, this car had been sat out in the desert for a long time without a deck lid, so all that paint was very brittle and cracked. It had to come off. Also, another interesting thing is this is the area, this tab right here is for that license plate panel, and this is not stock. I welded this on. This has been my attachment point for the welder for over a year now, and today it's going to be all painted up. So that means, you know, celebrate, the welding is over. And then also, you know, down here, this lip right here is a common rust area, and mine was starting to rust. I used the wire brush and dug out all the surface rust on here. Mine's in good shape, but if you have a car, you're thinking about buying one of these cars, this is a common area to rust. Even though it's back here by the engine, it's a horizontal shelf and it does collect water. Okay, I still need to get that rubber grommet off. So it's soaked overnight, so I'm going to go underneath there and put a little bit of heat on it and hope for the best. Okay, this does not want to come off cleanly, so unfortunately I'm going to have to destroy it to get it out. So here is the problem right here. This thing was just rusted and had undercoating and just a lot of junk in there. The penetrating oil couldn't get into it. So it was in one of those areas right above the cable tube. So it just collected a bunch of dirt and just couldn't get this off. So I cut it off from the inside. It didn't damage anything from the inside. So let's continue. I'm just going to do a really quick scuff with this red Scotch-Brite pad, just real quick, rough it up, and then it's time to spray the epoxy. Now I'm ready to spray the epoxy primer, but I like to brush it in these confined areas and these little seams that I cleaned out really well. So I like to push the epoxy primer in there and just let it roll down the seam. That helps keep it from corroding in the future. So any of the tough areas to spray, I just brush it in. I did a little bit down there in those channels, a little bit here in the corner as well, just really difficult to get to areas. And I'm also trying something new today too, because I'm spraying in this confined area and it's quite a bit to spray. I'm going to use this fan. It's an exhaust fan with like a furnace filter in front of it. So I'm hoping that it will downdraft some of the fumes and some of the overspray into that filter and sort of keep the air a little bit cleaner. I have that fan running at a very low speed. The fan is plugged into this transformer actually, so it's on low speed, but it's even set to a lower setting here, so it's just barely spinning. I don't want to kick up a bunch of dirt, I just want to suck out some fumes. Okay, I didn't record the second coat of epoxy primer, but you got to take my word for it. It's on here. This is, you know, coming out pretty nice. Let me grab the flashlight. So just like the front, you know, it looks a lot better when it's all one color. And there's still some disparity in the texture because some of it's been ground off. So I'm going to be replacing some of the texture with an undercoat gun. Okay, so next up, I'm going to be filling that seam with some seam sealer. I've already loaded it up with my paintbrush with epoxy primer, and it's a pretty narrow gap. So I'm just going to use some conventional seam sealer and try to make it look a little bit like factory with some brush marks or whatever in it. This is where I applied the seam sealer, and I tried to brush it with the acid brush, just kind of make it look messy like it did originally. But most importantly, it's down in that little crevice, so this will keep the water out and corrosion from getting in there. I'm going to be shooting over this with the undercoating, but this is just kind of the base. And then I also cheated a little bit around these areas, which, you know, I had ground off the undercoating to be metal so I can weld those nuts on. And there was a large step between the undercoating and the bare metal. So I just sort of filled it in a little bit with the seam sealer. And I'm going to go over this with undercoating, try to blend it in. So that's just a little bit of a cheat. And here's the other side. Kind of looks the same. And I purposely left it a little messy. Okay, that was just the first coat, and I didn't put it on super heavy, but it's already blending in pretty well, and you can see how it kind of fans out. This is the roughest texture I can select on the gun, and you can see I taped off the areas I want to remain smooth, but I'm going to let this dry and then come back with a second coat because I need to build up some thickness in the areas that I ground it down. The texture is looking pretty consistent, so I just want to give this about 30 minutes and then I'll come back and shoot another coat.
Now, the first coat was really light.
Don't you hate it when people post pictures of their head sticking out of the engine bay? I'm speechless.